What's going on, guys? Liam Wetter here, and what I'm going to show you today is how we track walleyes from where we know they spawned, where we know they were just after the spawn like I talked about in a previous video, and then how we track them along their progression out to the summer humps. So if you guys like this type of content, make sure you hit the subscribe button, like the video. But enough of that, I'm going to show you how we track these fish from where they spawned out to where they're going to spend the summer, because I think a lot of people lose track of them in that transition period. First thing we're gonna do here is start where we know the fish are, or know the fish were rather. So if you guys don't know how to find spring walleyes right after the spawn, make sure you check out my last video. It'll be one of the end screen tags, and I'll leave it down in the description. But that is where we're gonna start today. We're gonna start there, and then I'm gonna show you how we go through actually tracking the migration of these fish as they start to move out into the deeper water. But step one is knowing where they spawned, knowing where they were a couple weeks ago. We'll start there, and then we'll gradually move out.
Gotta be something around that rock. Molly.
Look at this beauty. Not a giant one, but oh my gosh. Look at that. You think you wanted that? It'll be a couple of weeks now. Or actually, no, right. Pretty soon, at any time. The walleyes will be the big, huge hexagenio limbata, which is the big mayfly species. They're going to start hatching, and these fish are going to become slightly more difficult to catch on minnow style baits. We'll let her go. For right now though, they're still reasonably shallow, starting to move out. It won't be too long until they start to hit the main lake structure, the spines coming off islands, humps, reefs. But we're kind of catching them right in that transition phase where, like you saw in one of my previous videos, I talked about how they stick around in the shallow water. They're beginning that migration out, and we're actually intercepting them right now off of a main lake point. What I'm talking about here is, say for example, you know that they spawned in here after the spawn when the season opens, you caught them in here, and then you know that during the summer they spend time out here, or during the summer they spend time on this point, or whatever. What you can do is actually, so say you know that they spawned right here. You can draw a line from right here out to right here, and you know this is where they summer. So it's a very good bet that if they're not here, or say they spawned in here, they'll be here off this point, and then they'll be here on this cluster of small shoals in shallower water, and then they might migrate out to the deeper humps. Or if you know for a fact that they're out this way, you can draw a line this way, so it's okay, it's a safe assumption that say they're spawning here, that they're going to hit this point, and then they'll make their way out to this point, this spine coming off the island, and then say there's a hump up here, they may make the progression out there. So if you guys know that there are fish here during the spring, and you know that you catch fish out here in the summer, it sounds straightforward, but it's overlooked. You can literally draw a line and predict their exact migration.
Opening day walleye in there. Not there, but just around the corner.
Whoa, yeah.
There's a lot of fish stacked up in there.
Yeah. Pinned him on the jerk. He was in a foot of water.
Walleye?
Yep. I mean, that's the other cool thing about doing this too is, I mean, after the water's about 63 degrees, and the females will lay their eggs and then actually pull. That's all right. And then they'll actually pull out from the back bays where the beds are and start to feed again after they've laid their eggs. So the cool thing about finding walleyes on this similar structure is that the female smallmouth tend to be mixed in. Right in the corner of the mouth again. I'll show you what I'm using here for bait in a minute, because it's pretty special. But there's another one. What we're doing, and it's pretty cool too, is if you look and you know roughly where they spawned, look at that, he's pretty perky, eh? Let him go. If you know roughly where they spawned and roughly where they're heading, you can basically like look on a map and draw lines between the spawning bays, the places that you found them just after the spawn, when they're staying in shallow, feeding on the fertile water. And then you can actually draw lines out to the structure that you know they're going to be spending the summer. So if you know, okay, right here, this is where they spawned, they've hung around here for a few months, they're starting to move out to the main lake points, you can draw lines literally on a map to the large structures and the reefs that you know hold them in the summer months. And any checkpoint along those lines are like restaurants for these fish this time of the year, and they're gonna hit those checkpoints on their way out to the main lake structure. So like I said, just to reiterate, if you know there's a school of fish here, you've caught them here in the early spring, and you know out there is where you catch them in the summer, you can draw lines between it and find pieces of structure along the way out there that are going to hold these fish. If they're not here, they might be there. If they're not there, they might be there until they make it out to the summer spots. And that's a great way of tracking them down. Oh, I just had my bait in the water and one hit it, I think. But it's a great way of doing it, and a great way to just piece together the puzzle to these springtime walleyes. There are a number of ways to catch walleyes, but one of my favorite ways, and it's a pretty sustainable way too, just considering you're pretty much using one bait throughout the day if you can keep it on, is the jerk from Crush City. So there's a bunch of features that make this a pretty exciting bait, but the number one is obviously just the durability. I mean, you can catch pike on this all day long. They're never gonna rip it up. Like, you can hardly break it. It'll slip through your fingers before. And then also this material is buoyant. So, I mean, that's just not to mention also that there's salt and scent infused, so they're not all oily and greasy and salty. It's actually inside the bait that just gets into the water when the bait's in there. But one of my favorite things about this material is that it floats. So you can imitate several different bait fish with this. The one main notable one is that you can hang it horizontally in the water. So this is a Ned rig jig, and this is a good jig. I mean, you can use different weights. This is for fishing fairly shallow water. But when you hang it in the water, the weight of the head is trying to pull down and the weight of the tail is pulling up, making this sit in the water column perfectly horizontal. So this is how bait fish swim. This is how Cisco's, smelts, shiners all swim through the water horizontally like this. You can imitate that perfectly if you're, moping, fishing vertical, keeping it up off the bottom. Or because the tail floats, if you sit the head on the bottom, the tail will actually come up. So much like a Ned rig, how you can shake it on the bottom and you can get the tail to wag on the Ned rig and it can dance and shake around, you can do a very similar thing with this on the bottom. And what that does actually is it imitates like a dace or a chub, a minnow species, a genuine minnow species that is feeding on the bottom. And what that allows you to do is imitate bait fish that are feeding on the bottom. So there are two ways to fish this. You can either fish this style of bait moping, like hanging it horizontally, vertically in the water column, and the bait's hanging horizontally, or you can tap it along the bottom and imitate a feeding minnow. So it's been a great presentation. The walleyes are digging it, and so are the smallmouths. So just wanted to fill you in on that. Oh, big walleye. It's a beauty. Oh, nice. I'll leave him over the edge there. You think you wanted the jerk? Northern Ontario, walleye, gold. This is applicable everywhere. Where they spawn and where they summer are two different places, but if you figure out their migratory lines, where they go and the checkpoints they stop at, the little restaurants, if you will, on their way out to the summer locations, you can piece together some pretty good walleye fishing when they're doing their migration. So try it out. I think you guys are gonna find this one useful.